The quiet before the storm. I am Jack Reynolds. I retired 6 months ago, cashing out my life savings and purchasing a 1,200 square FT wooden cabin in Pine Valley Estates. No more FEMA briefings, no more FBI joint ops, no more political posturing during national crises. Just me, my tools, and a quiet life repairing busted faucets. A handyman with a history so secretive, I couldn't even tell myself what I'd done before. But Pine Valley had its own type of mayhem. It sported lipstick, toted a clipboard, and called herself Karen Mitchell. She wasn't merely my neighbor. She was our HOA president, the type who took your grass measurement with a ruler and phoned the city if your mailbox tilted 2 degrees to the left. And that Tuesday marked the end. The visitor with no past. I was mounting motion sensors when Marcus Cole drove into my garage. A face from my government days. But not any face. Marcus was in witness protection. 6 months prior, he'd volunteered to testify against one of the biggest cybercrime rings in the nation. He'd been moved twice. Tonight, he required an untraceable location. I was in his debt, so I agreed. He opened the trunk, encrypted equipment, jamming devices, top-of-the-line surveillance equipment. To us, par for the course. To Karen, it was the beginning of World War III. In a matter of minutes, she was at the fence. Lipstick fresh, eyes cold, voice syrupy. Jack, is your friend cleared to have military-level gear in our residential community? I remained cool, just putting in home security. But Marcus was on edge. He breathed quietly. I'm being followed. If law enforcement is brought in, my cover's blown. I recognized that gaze in Karen's eyes. She'd already concluded we were guilty. She called the police, but that was just the beginning. 20 minutes later, the entire Pine Valley PD descended. On my house, guns drawn, flashing lights, Kevlar. The works. Karen stood across the street like a proud general, clipboard in hand. That's him, she pointed at Marcus. I saw him bringing bombs in. The lead officer, clearly exhausted by another Karen-fueled emergency, asked us to step out. Marcus made his call. He handed over his DHS credentials. I'm a federal witness, under protection. This is authorized surveillance tech. The air shifted. Radios crackled. Things got serious. Then she arrived. Detective Sarah Brooks, my old partner from emergency ops. She read the scene, pieced it together fast. But before anyone could de-escalate, Karen exploded again. I don't care who he works for. I'm protecting my community. Sarah cautioned me softly. Those who tell you they will do it themselves, they mean it. Marcus packed. His cover was blown. I thought the nightmare was over. I was wrong. The shot that shattered everything. Karen slammed her front door. Minutes later, she came out with a .38 revolver shining in her hand. Not frantic. Ready? I'll defend my neighborhood myself, she yelled across the street. I called Sarah. She rushed back. But before she could reach Karen, Marcus returned. He'd forgotten a secure communication device. Federal protocol required him to retrieve it. Karen saw him. Her finger twitched on the trigger. He's back to finish what he started, she shouted. Marcus held up his hands. I'm just here to grab. The shot exploded. He dropped, blood pouring from his leg. There were screams. Across the road, Sarah pulled out her gun, told Karen to put down hers. Karen just stood there. He was threatening us. I needed to defend us. And then I saw. Marcus's cuff rolled up when I was trying to stem the bleeding. And there it was. a crescent moon-shaped scar on his wrist. Karen's face turned white. "No," she breathed. "No, it can't be. The blood doesn't lie." The paramedics arrived on the scene. Marcus's blood type, O negative, uncommon. Karen nervously stepped forward. "Test mine," she requested. "I can donate. I can help." They stared at her as though she were crazy, but she was compatible. The compatibility test itself was standard procedure. What it showed wasn't. Not only was her blood compatible, it was a genetic perfect match. Dr. Hayes dragged me aside, brow furrowed. "Mr. Reynolds, she's not only a match, she's his biological mother." Karen slumped. Sobs unlike anything I'd ever witnessed from her. 25 years ago, I left a baby boy with a crescent-shaped birthmark at this hospital. She wasn't a poor woman driven to make tough decisions. She was involved in an underground baby selling ring. Marcus was to be sold for $30,000. When the buyer backed out, she dumped him like trash, and now she'd shot the child she abandoned. But the story wasn't over while Karen sat in jail awaiting federal charges and Marcus recovered in the hospital. Sarah started digging deeper. "Jack," she said, flipping through old case files, "do you know how many weird reports have come out of Pine Valley in the last 5 years? Poisoned pets, vandalized houses, mysterious diseases, always unsolved, always pushed under HOA documents, and always occurring within a block of Karen Mitchell. Buried beneath the HOA, I believed the worst was done. Karen was in jail. Marcus was in recovery. The media had begun sniffing, and federal agents had quietly inserted themselves to contain the fallout, but there was something off. Why did Karen respond as she did to that scar, that particular scar? Why was Pine Valley's HOA so fixated on spying, codes, and neighborhood safety, yet always seemed to ignore real crimes? Why had several neighbors recently departed in the dead of night during the last 3 years without a goodbye? I wasn't merely a former federal coordinator anymore. I was now a witness, and most importantly, I was the sole person asking the correct questions. Trends in the quiet. Detective Sarah Brooks and I began poring over the Pine Valley HOA records together. It appeared, initially, to be typical suburban micromanaging, petty fines for flower pots that don't quite match community color schemes, teenage complaints about loitering at dusk, noise infractions at 3 p.m. for birthday parties that featured jazz music. But then Sarah discovered it, a pattern that chilled both of us. Whenever a resident complained about real crime break-ins, animal poisonings, or suspicious packages, their complaint was closed within 48 hours. Closed without an investigation, without follow-up, without any police file number. And guess whose name signed off on all of them? Karen Mitchell. A hidden file, a deeper crime, inside a locked filing cabinet in the HOA. Office 1. Karen kept inside her own garage. We found a folder, labeled Neighborhood Watch. Incidents level red. Inside were black and white photos, notes in shorthand, names, times, license plates. But the kicker, every file had a red stamp. Contained. I'd seen these kinds of logs before. In my old federal days, we relied on similar documentation to track possible national threats prior to releasing them to the public. The only difference was, we did it with full legal scrutiny. Karen was doing this in stealth mode, on civilians, and one name kept reappearing: Marcus Cole. The forgotten surveillance tape. Sarah subpoenaed the HOA's antiquated security system. The majority of video had already been erased according to HOA storage policy. But there was one corrupt drive, with salvageable bits. We sat in silence. A date-stamped video, 3 years old. A boy who looked like he was 16 arguing with Karen in the driveway. Same jawline as Marcus, same gait, same crescent, scar fresh and prominent. He was yelling, clutching a manila folder. The audio was muffled, but we caught snippets. You can't act like I don't exist. You sold me. Karen struck him. He pushed the folder into her breast and strode away. Karen stared straight into the camera, then cut the electricity. That boy was not Marcus, but he had heard of him, and that boy was gone now. A secret hidden in Lot 17, the boy in the video came to be identified as Daniel Leary, a foster child, had been temporarily placed in Pine Valley with a retired couple on Lot 17. They left weeks after the video was shot, sold the house quickly. No trace of where Daniel went, no forwarding address, no CPS reports, no body, but on a property scan, Sarah saw something strange about Lot 17, a discrepancy in land registry submissions, 10 square feet of non-residential use. Right behind the garden, we obtained a warrant. We excavated. What we uncovered wasn't a corpse. It was a safe. In it, duplicates of birth certificates, blackmail materials, and a thumb drive marked MV Alpha. Marcus's name appeared in 3 of those files. But so did Karen's. So did 2 other members of the HOA board. And eerily so did the name of a state senator from our district. Marcus wakes up. Marcus awoke 2 days later. He didn't recall much of the shooting, but as we showed him the scar on the boy's wrist from the video, his breath caught. "That's Daniel," he whispered. "He discovered me 5 years ago, told me he was looking for others like us." "Others like us?" I asked. "Children trafficked on fraudulent birth certificates in the 90s and early 2000s, Marcus said. "The scars, they're from the ID bracelets we were branded with before being turned over. And Karen, she wasn't a monster once. She was part of a structured ring. Pine Valley wasn't merely her hideout, it was her syndicate. And now, the deeper we went, the more individuals desired to silence us. The attempted cover-up the next night. My power went out. My cabin's perimeter alarm triggered at 2:03 a.m. I grabbed my old sidearm and checked the cameras. 2 men in black hoodies. No license plate, no lights. But they weren't here to scare me. They went straight to the shed where I kept Marcus's backup gear. I flipped the floodlights. They ran. But before I could get a good read of a patch on one of the men's sleeves, PV Facilities Division, Pine Valley, HOA. These were not hired goons. These were insiders. The scar was just the beginning. I used to think it was easy to recognize monsters. They resembled warlords, dictators, government watch-listed hackers. But monsters don't necessarily come with masks. Sometimes they reside next door, on committees, bake casseroles for local potlucks, and smile while they destroy your whole life in a single phone call. Karen Mitchell had smiled that way for 25 years, and now we knew why. But standing at the threshold of revealing something greater than one woman's sins, I realized something more sinister. She wasn't alone. She never was. The silent board, Sarah and I concentrated on the HOA board, 5 members. Karen was in jail. That left for Eldon Price, treasurer, half owner of the houses in Pine Valley. Leela Graves, secretary. Ex-child psychologist. Bill and Marjorie Crane, married. Realtors and local philanthropists. They weren't merely HOA volunteers. They were the planners of something much worse. Sarah issued proper subpoenas for all board finances, and that evening, her tires were cut. An unmarked van trailed me for 12 miles, and then I lost it just before Ridgeview Bridge. And Marcus, recovering in the hospital, had a delivery, an empty envelope with something in it, a crescent moon pendant, broken in two. The message was obvious: stop digging or vanish. The cause of the scar back at the hospital, Marcus finally told the rest of his tale. When I was 6, he went on, voice raspy, I remember a woman yelling at a man about contracts and dead leads. I didn't know what it meant then, but now, I think they were discussing me. Karen hadn't been working alone. She had been part of a larger child trafficking operation. The children weren't left behind. They were sold, marked with new names, scars to designate lots. Marcus had been batch 7. The crescent moon symbolized the child was clean, no illnesses, no warning signs, worth much to top-shelf buyers. Batch 6, triangle mark, batch 8. They weren't children, they were merchandise, and we had evidence that they'd been trafficked through Pine Valley. Eldon Price's secrets we followed, money trails from the HOA account back to a shell company named Everich Holdings. Sarah ran the documents through a contact with the federal government. Everich was traced to offshore transfers, to anonymous real estate trusts, and ultimately to Eldon Price. And what did Everich hold? 11 houses in Pine Valley, 3 in surrounding towns, a non-profit counseling center, which had apparently burned down in 2011. Marcus's eyes widened when he saw the logo. That's where I lived, in between foster homes. Eldon was more than a treasurer. He was the banker for the whole operation. The missing children map with technical assistance from Marcus. We cracked the thumb drive, discovered in Lot 17's safe. Inside, a map, red dots everywhere in the state. Dozens of them, each with a file name, names, dates of birth. Comments such as rejected deformity and delivered paid. This was not merely Pine Valley. It was a ring that extended across counties, across generations. And somehow, in spite of all the warning signs, no one had put an end to it, because no one knew where to look. The fire and the trap, we were close. Too close, so they hit us. At 3:22 a.m., my cabin burned, arson verified. Someone had tossed accelerant along the east wall and thrown a Molotov into my back window. Fortunately, I wasn't home. I'd moved into a motel 2 nights prior to the second break-in attempt. Sarah called it by its name, a threat. You're the sole civilian with classified level proof, she said. They want you deleted without a trail. We had one chance. We had to lure them. Setting the snare, we dropped a tip anonymously through a bogus account linked to a bogus news blog. Whistleblower close to pinning state senator connected to Pine Valley trafficking ring. We mentioned nobody, but we knew who would freak out. 2 days later, Marcus's hospital room was broken into. Only this time, we were ready. Sarah had set a silent alarm and rearranged the security cameras. The intruder was in hospital scrubs, slipped in at about 2:14 a.m., got 5 feet into the room before Sarah emerged from the closet, badge aloft, gun held. The man stood still. We knew him right away. Bill Crane. The shakedown bill folded under interrogation. Told him someone higher up told him to silence the witness. She was only meant to watch deliveries and provide silence, he confessed. The actual decisions, they were made by donors, politicians, influential buyers, and a single name was repeatedly mentioned: Senator Vernon Hale, respected, powerful, unassailable. He'd made his reputation defending family values and clean neighborhoods, and he had come to Pine Valley 3 times last year. Each time, at one of the now infamous handoffs, we had him, or so we believed. The actual cost of justice 2 days later, Bill was discovered dead in his detention cell. Suicide, they said. No video, no witnesses. Eldon Price was gone. Marjorie Graves, lawyered up, and Senator Hale held a press conference the following day, smiling, talking about community restoration after the disturbance created by unvetted federal overreach. The guy was above reproach, unless we did something reprehensible, unless we went public. That blood on her doorstep when Sarah went to the scene of the crime, she didn't begin with the gunman. She began at the door. Karen's front porch had been swabbed clean, professionally. No prints, not even hers, but under the floorboard, dry blood, old, cracked, tucked under a potted plant. Not from me or the evening of the shooting. Lab results. It was from a boy, male, around 7 years old, consistent with head trauma blood pattern. Sarah looked at me silently. "How long has Karen lived in the house?" she asked. 25 years, I replied. Then that boy's most likely been missing for 24. A box in the wall at the hospital. I recalled something else. 2 days prior to the shooting, I saw Karen gazing at the east fence, the common border of our properties. She stood there for almost an hour, just staring. When I asked her if she needed assistance, she turned as though she hadn't heard me, glazed eyes, mouth open slightly, then simply walked off. Sarah had a forensics unit come out to examine the fence. Nothing. But on a whim, they removed the outer panel. Behind it, stuck in insulation and a rotting brick cavity, was a rusty tin lunchbox. Inside, a kid's bracelet, a broken tooth at the root, and a black and white photograph of Karen, holding an infant. On the back written, Michael, 1998. The child she never reported. Karen Mitchell did not have children. That's what all her neighbors testified. That's what her background check established. No birth records, no hospital records, no school registrations. But there was Michael, and something seemed to tell me. Michael never left Pine Valley. Sarah dug deeper. County adoption records, medical examiner records, missing persons registries, and then she found it. Michael Granger, 7, missing in June of 2005, last seen in the area of Pine Valley. Foster child. Several placements. No official guardian of record. But the picture, the one in the tin box, was not publicly available. So how did Karen possess it? Unless she was his last placement, and he never left alive. The silent street that week, neighbors became silent. One at a time, they quit talking to me, turned away, closed their blinds when I passed by. Even Mrs. Kelly, who brought us freshly baked cornbread, suddenly told me, "I think you should cease your inquiries, Mr. Morgan." Certain tales were put in the ground for a reason. Sarah called me last night. They know something. They're scared. Of her or what she's hiding. Then her tone lowered. "Marcus, I retrieved city zoning applications for the past 30 years. You won't believe this. Karen Mitchell had submitted a permit in 2002 to put in a storm shelter on her land. But it was never constructed. The foundation, though, was poured straight under the shed at the back of her garden, and no one had ever opened it. Digging in the dark, we came back at 2:13 a.m. Sarah, 2 agents, and I federal search warrant. In hand, we cracked the lock. The shed was cluttered with gardening equipment, fertilizer, and dusty HOA meeting binders. But under the fake floorboards, a metal hatch. We forced it open. The stench got us first. Rotting, filth saturated with something thicker than rain. We descended. In that basement were 4 boxes, marked with old masking tape. 1998, 2001, 2005, Michael. Sarah opened the 4th one. Inside, a ripped Spider-Man backpack, a Polaroid of Karen and a boy playing with a toy automobile, a blood-soaked blanket and a second bullet casing. 22 caliber, same caliber she used on me, except this one was covered in blood, fresh enough to have been sent for tests. The witness returns. I knew I had to say something. For weeks I'd said nothing about what I remembered. Thought it would keep me safe, but I had no choice now. Karen didn't question who I was when she shot me. I explained to Sarah. She knew me. I explained to her something I'd never spoken out loud, that I was a foster child as well, that my birth records were sealed when I was given up by my mother under witness protection relocation, that when Karen screamed, "You came back," before she pulled the trigger, I felt something odd, not fright, recognition, familiarity, the unthinkable probability. Sarah ran a partial DNA test on the blood in the old crate labeled Michael, compared it to mine, and the outcome, partial sibling match, which only left one possibility. Michael was not merely a kid Karen had been looking after. He was my brother, which put me wondering about the question I hadn't been able to bring myself to think. If Karen took Michael, did she take me to a returned child? Sarah discovered a last connection. A social worker's note in 1998. Twin boys, removed from custody due to unsafe home. One placed with extended foster family. Second placement unknown file, sealed. Code K3. Karen Mitchell's birth name, Karen Granger. The K coincided. 3 months after Michael vanished, a boy had been secretly placed in an alternate foster home. Me, they'd changed my name. My record was wiped out of state records. But I wasn't in hiding from the law. I was kept out of sight by someone else, to conceal a murder, to wipe out a twin brother, to begin anew. The childhood I never recalled. Sarah discovered my sealed foster files. They were slim, nearly a file at all. No medical records, no pre-adoption summaries. Only one red-stamped word, placement for protection. That wasn't typical jargon. It meant someone did not want me to be found. The deeper Sarah dug, the more she found inconsistencies. My social security number had been issued 2 years later than it should have been. My immunization record was forged. Even my name Marcus was not in the initial file. Who the hell was I? Karen's final warning. Sarah came back into the interrogation room. "Why did you keep that picture of Michael?" she asked. "Why conceal the evidence?" "Because the ones who killed him," Karen's eyes narrowed, "are still around, and I was the only one protecting Marcus." Then she said one final thing, softly. "They'll come for him now." The storm-sheltered tapes in the fake floor hideout where we discovered Michael's crate. Sarah also found an old camcorder and 6 dusty VHS tapes. We played them. Tape 1. Karen cradling a baby me, singing softly. The date, 1999. Tape 2. Michael, 6 years old, playing with toy cars while Karen anxiously peeks out the window. In the distance, a black SUV across the street. Tape 4. Distorted. Sounds, then muffled screams. Michael wailing. Karen screaming. "You said no one would get hurt." Tape 5 was empty. Tape 6. Me, in a hospital bed. Bandaged, barely breathing. Karen crying next to me. The black SUV Sarah checked the license plate number readable on the tape. Government registered came up. D. Confidential program. Flagged. The system note stated, do not chase without federal authorization. Sensitive operations connected to Witness Relocation Program, KPHX-12. Sarah's complexion went grayish. Marcus, this has nothing to do with Karen. This is what your actual parents witnessed, or did. I wasn't a foster child. I was a protected witness. Child, and the agency had archived every record of me. The file Lamid Phoenix Sarah drew a file with the name KPHX-12 from a federal record. Inside, picture of man and woman, my birth parents. A witness statement in a drug trafficking case connected to a cartel, a relocation order for 2 infants, both under one handwritten note. Keep the twins apart. One is already compromised. Sarah stared at me. They didn't just place you for safety. They concealed you from your own family. Karen's deal with the devil Karen wasn't an insider. She was a piece on the inside. In 1998, she was employed as a janitor in a federal courthouse. Files indicated that she had been visited by someone in the DOJ who'd made her an offer of compensation for accepting a high-risk child, Michael, when she refused to play along with their scheme to transfer Michael again. She disappeared from the program. They wiped her files, flagged her as unstable, left her to fade into Pine Valley. But she didn't fade. She went underground, brought Michael off the grid, and when he died, she took the secret to the grave with him. The neighbors' code of silence, Pine Valley was more than a gated community. It was a holding facility. 50% of its residents, ex-Fed agents, retired contractors, witnesses in new identities. This neighborhood was built by the government, and everyone here had something to hide. When Karen started threatening to expose what she knew, they turned on her. That's why she was always paranoid. That's why she was watching the fences. Because she knew, if they learned Marcus had come back, they'd finish what they started. The final twist Sarah got. A phone call, an anonymous tip, male voice, scrambled. You've opened a box you don't understand. Tell Marcus to stop digging, or next time they won't miss. 1 hour later, Karen was discovered unconscious in her cell, poisoned, but not dead. Comatose, her last words, at least what they assume. Where her last words were scrawled in lipstick on the bathroom mirror. He wasn't your twin, he was your son. The memory returns. I sat beside Karen's hospital bed, her face deathly pale, her breathing shallow. Sarah handed me a medical envelope. Inside, a scan of my hippocampus, damage consistent with chemical suppression of memory. Someone drugged you, she whispered, as a child. That night, I dreamed again, but this time, I didn't wake up screaming. I saw it clearly. The basement, the screaming, Michael small, trembling, clinging to me, a guy in black gloves, a syringe, and me, pleading with them not to touch him. The government's cleaners, Sarah, had discovered a name, Colton Briggs, former DEA, last known working under Operation Phoenix, same as my record. He wasn't a cop, he was a cleaner, a government assassin who resolved internal assets. Michael wasn't meant to be alive. Karen had disobeyed orders, and I had seen them take Jim inject him while I yelled. Briggs made it appear as a medical mishap. Karen interred him with a covert autopsy, and I was under drugs until I forgot that it ever occurred. The tapes she kept from them, the last tape, stashed in the rear of the vent behind the storm shelter. It wasn't marked when we played it. It featured Karen, weeks following Michael's death, clutching me while I shrieked in shock, blood on my shirt and eyes frantic. She spoke to the camera in a whisper. They told me he died, but I saw Marcus stab the man in the suit. I think he was protecting Michael. He murdered someone, and he doesn't remember. The DNA test, we performed a full panel test. Karen's lipstick message tormented me. He was your son, but it did not fit. Michael was not my brother. Michael was not my son. He was my clone, a flawless DNA duplicate. Operation Phoenix was not a relocation project. It was an experiment. The project involved Sarah burglarized the home of a retired federal contractor, a Pine Valley resident, named Eleanor Drake. Eleanor was a part of a genetic test for DARPA, a top-secret military cloning program that used witness children as models. They weren't keeping me safe. They were copying me. Michael had been the control variable. I was the free variable. When Karen stole Michael and disappeared, they lost their data. That's why they came for him. That's why they drugged me. That's why they buried the whole town in silence. The town uprising, Sarah's broadcast. She posted the tapes, the documents, the DNA, and Pine Valley imploded. Exigents burst from their doorsteps. News trucks converged on the gates, and all hidden secrets started crawling out. Karen's coma broke, but she was quiet, still, eyes wide open, but unblinking. The doctors diagnosed catatonic shock, but I knew better. She was waiting, watching, listening. The final revelation, I discovered a second mirror message one evening. Karen had scribbled with her fingernail, lightly inscribed into the hospital glass, "Look in the dirt under the old willow." I did. We dug for hours, and there, in a metal container, was a bloody children's jacket. In the pocket, a badge, D. Name, Colton Briggs. The man I'd seen in the dream. The one I stabbed. The corpse was never discovered because Karen buried it, and to save me, she took the blame for all of it. The goodbye letter, I was given a sealed letter by a nurse. Karen's will, it had. "Marcus, you were never meant to remember, but I always knew you would. You were born fighting, and even when they tried to break you, you defended the only family you had. I was not your biological mother, but I accepted you, and I would do it again. The reality is, they only produced one of you, but they can never replicate your soul." I wept until I couldn't breathe, and for the first time, I forgave her. Final scene, the last scene, I stood at Pine Valley's gates one last time. Behind me, federal agents stormed into homes, zip-tied neighbors, and led out men who used to call me Buddy. Ahead, liberty, actual liberty, but also more questions. Because if they cloned me once, who did they clone next? And where are they?